Good morning and welcome to the Grim. I'm your host, Kristen. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Taphophilia, located anywhere and everywhere. So grab your favorite mug, cozy up, and let's take a dig into history. This week's episode is a little different, but trust me, we'll be back next week opening another gate into a fantastic graveyard. I thought it might be ideal to share a little bit more of the where and why for the Grimm's creation, and the subject of taphophilia in this episode for listeners. Something I rather thought I was alone in my interest of, yet found I really wasn't. Taphophilia is a noun meaning the love of funerals, cemeteries, and the rituals of death, by the way, if today's title wasn't clear enough. The main ingredient of the Grimm, though, other than taphophilia, stems from my love of history. As a child, history was one of my favorite subjects in school, and even as I grew up, never faded away. I read various books outside the classroom and eventually in college, living in London for 4 years, immersed myself even more into the subject through tours and history classes. No, I wasn't a history major though, which made some of my history course choices bizarre for a computer engineering student. Yet, when talking about bizarre within history, taphophilia is rather essential. When you think about what we know from our ancestors or science had discovered, came from in a way of grave robbing without the historical and anthropological information destroyed. Uncovering our ancestors to know more from their final resting places has given us invaluable information from the past that we would have never been able to achieve because we just can't ask them. How they died, what they ate, the condition of their bones, and how they were buried can and has given us insights into their culture we would have never known. In the name of history, an archaeological dig uncovering ancient tombs or ruins is looked at respectfully, but the love of graves or death is deemed macabre. One seen strolling through a local graveyard is looked at vastly different and quite frankly shunned when the passions are practically the same. I absolutely not am saying to go to your local graveyard and start your own archaeological dig. Please don't, it's illegal and not the point of this episode, just saying. As archaeologists are expert and I am not, nor are many others. But the interest and passions from most of the taphophilia community I find are similar. We want to know more about them, where we came from, and find those who came before us, who are aptly found most likely in our local graveyard, which is the best place to start. The first time I walked through a graveyard as a daily occurrence and not for a special tour, or for any particular reason, was in London, England during university. A pathway into town leads you through a small graveyard just briefly for a moment. That moment was enough for taphophilia to take. Graveyards are serene, peaceful, and a remembrance of loved ones. But in this one, I knew no one. Completely unknown to me, their lives, families, and existence would have never crossed my paths, but because of this pathway, I saw their graves countless times. Each passing, I noticed something different, bringing a short memory alive of a life past, however brief. Cemeteries also were more elaborate, gothic, and extravagant as well in times past. Taking a look at Highgate Cemetery, it's hard not to admire the ornate detail that went into graves, statues, and crypts. Life in cities hundreds of years ago dealt with death very differently throughout their ages. The exposure in daily life to cemeteries, graveyards is far more likely to happen as well, or let us just say there are far more graveyards within these towns. Growing up in the Midwest, we had the ability to have large towns with cemeteries and graveyards removed and distanced from our daily lives, which is what I was accustomed to. American culture also treats death as a taboo moral issue that led me to have a very sheltered life from graveyards or cemetery visits. The only reason you go to a graveyard or a cemetery is to see a loved one who has passed on, not to just explore or tour one. My small exposure from my past of graveyards and then to seeing them daily fed into my curiosity and started an interest in becoming a tombstone tourist unknowingly. This interest, however, took a backseat to life, and it wasn't until later into my late 20s it came back to haunt me. On a trip to New Orleans with a good friend of mine, a few of the sightseeing attractions were cemeteries, ghost tours, and voodoo shops. New Orleans is notorious for burying their loved ones above ground due to the natural landscape of their city, as we went over in the Cities of the Dead episode. Death has also become embraced in the culture of the city, in unique ways not found in other places of the world. This reopened my fascination at once with cemeteries and the rituals of death. What took a turn for me was the celebration of life within a death. In New Orleans, they simply don't just mourn as others do, but have a second line or jazz funeral. Starting out as mourning and grief, the second line progresses to a joyful remembrance, parading through the streets to the honoree's grave as family members bear the burden of death, not alone, but with each other and their community. It brought me to the stark realization of how diverse the celebration of death, rituals, and even the attitude or culture toward death can be in America. From that moment on in my travels, I included graveyards or cemeteries on the itinerary. Seeing how each city lived but also died created a complete, comprehensive way to their circle of life, doing as historians have done for years and years before me. I wanted to learn about their past by learning about death. I was hooked, and now, years into my interest, learn I'm not alone but one of many who too have the same fascination. Not all visitors within graveyard gates are mourning the loss of loved ones, but are there for other reasons too. Using social media, it's now easy to tour Père Lachaise or Bonaventure, but the significance is never the same virtually. In their presence, these places hold you in ways pictures could never grasp. It's a humbling piece that some never have the taste for, and yet others it can lead you on a journey of fascination and probably down a rabbit hole into history. I find many times while digging into the history of these graveyards and cemeteries, there's so much history we weren't taught in school. There's dark sides uncovered from whitewashing historical figures, parts deliberately left out, or in some cases, just completely forgotten. Which, in a way, brings to mind the Disney movie Coco, a beautifully done animated film based on the significance of remembering our loved ones and cherishing our past while living out our own dreams in the future. Remembering those who've gone before us and honoring them is an essential part of our path forward. That's my takeaway from the film, anyway. There's so many lessons, disturbing details, and odd facts that surface in researching graveyards that makes it even more fascinating. Some cemeteries, like Highgate, are gardens or natural reserves. The large acreage of land provides green spaces for wildlife and plants undisturbed from destruction and become safe havens. It's a wildly different view that, from our own ritual of burying our dead, the peace of that passing gives wildlife a haven from humanity. It's very odd. Birds, plants, and for example, foxes have homes within that are protected by those who've passed. They become sacred grounds in more ways than one. Yet graveyards also have reputations. Haunted, eerie, and demonic tales are born from experiences or the aura of the grounds. Chilly fall nights of those looking for a good ghost tale, intertwined with the atmosphere within graveyards during Halloween, can be compelling to anyone. History becomes greater than fiction with tales such as the Salem witch trials, where those involved are buried and if their souls are truly laid to rest. It can drive millions to the grounds like Charter or Howard Street in the fall season alone, all because the ground's history that intrigues the public in rumors of hauntings. The history intertwined with claims of those reaching out beyond the veil from the afterlife and hauntings after suffering great tragedies can easily add to the aura of a burial ground. Knowing troubled souls lay to rest within but might seek vengeance or are desperate to tell their truths can lead to notoriety. McConnell Cemetery in Alabama is a perfect example of this, being notoriously haunted. Visitors claim to see Union soldiers within the grounds riding horses after tragically passing away in America's Civil War. Depending on personal beliefs, it's rumored when a human loses their life in a horrific or an extremely tragic event, their soul can become entrapped in a residual haunting, such as the Union soldiers' souls riding their horses forever caught in their last moments alive. In 1837, a man named Charles Babbage suggested that spoken words may leave permanent impressions in the air, even after they become inaudible due to the motion transfer between particles, thus creating the possibility that visitors in a graveyard might leave lasting impressions, affecting others who may enter after they've long gone. Some might not believe in such suggestions, but the ground's aura can still leave lasting impressions, with temple-like Gothic tombs worshipping those past. making visitors feel inferior in life and remind those just how short our lives are. When one person experiences such unexplainable events or eerie atmospheres, others attempt to also find reasoning in them or even a wish to repeat the experience on their own. Thus, urban legends can be born and lead some grounds to be infamous for reasons beyond history, just like Stoll Cemetery in Kansas from episode 8, where the claims of the devil visiting have been conjured up, but with little to no evidence existing. Visitors expecting to experience something otherworldly can lead to even the most mundane locations to change instantly to more. What happens to us in the afterlife and our human curiosity to know or make sense of it all comes out in various ways, with one being hauntings. I find these stories or details within the history of the grounds essential, giving you a more complete history of these graveyards. Whether you, the listener, believes in hauntings or not really isn't my or anyone's business. But if a vampire hunt desecrates the tombs in a famous graveyard, that does in every way become part of its history, and why some visitors might dare to enter, and is essential to know. So, whether you're here for a passing interest, history, hauntings, or never coming back to the grim, I hope in any of your daily travels or in your special ones you might appreciate your local graveyard or cemetery a little more, acknowledging that morbid to some as a place of peace, curiosity, history, nature, or at the very least a resting place of a loved one gone before us. The grave grind for Taphophilia was a freshly homemade brewed batch of Colombian El Virgo by Speedwell Coffee Company in a French press. For now, we're closing the gate on Taphophilia. We hope you enjoyed our dig into history. If you did, subscribe today and join us next time when we open the gate on the Grim.